I believe that cooking is about using all of your senses. And you want to be able to smell the food and taste it, look at it, touch it, even listen to it. I want you to learn how to think about food and cooking and eating in a different way. Once you know how to discern for yourself, you will be freed from recipes and ingredients lists, and you will know how it feels to cook in this way, full of excitement, discovery, and even joy. This kind of cooking is more accessible than you really think, because if you start with really good ingredients, you don't have to do much to them. It's believing that you can do this, and I think that I can really help you believe. I wanted to do this masterclass in my own kitchen, in my own house, so you could have a sense of how I live. I'm going to introduce you to my daughter, Fanny, who grew up in this kitchen and who is herself a wonderful cook. And I'm going to take you to Chez Benny's, to my backyard garden, to the farmer's market, and even the Edible Schoolyard Project. I believe if you begin cooking this way, that it will really change your life. It did mine. I'm Alice Waters, and this is my masterclass. Finding the best ingredients might feel daunting, but there's nothing mysterious about it. You just need to learn to follow your senses. I urge you to find a farmer's market where you live. But if you shop at a grocery store, you can apply the same principles. These are beautiful. Are they from around here?
The centrals? Yeah, those are Mendocino.
Mendocino, yeah. Ask where your food comes from, and ask for them to support local sustainable farmers in your area. Shopping at a farmer's market will allow you to talk directly to the people who grow your food.
This year, all of our whole wheat flour is 100% California grown, and in our white flour...
This is where I've learned almost everything I know, and I'm still learning. Next week. Farmers know the most about ripeness and taste. Ask them for help picking produce.
The nice thing about pears is they store well.
But you have to have a kind of cool place to put them. Oh, really?
And so we keep them right at freezing.
How long do they last at 32?
4 months.
4 months.
Yeah.
What I don't know. What I don't know.
We pick these in August.
Ask whether to use it that day or to let it ripen.
You know, when they start to shrivel right around the stem is when they're really sweet and juicy.
Always ask questions. This is the foundation of your edible education. I'm looking for food that is good, clean, and fair. Here are some of the questions to ask at the grocery store or the market. All the best cooks I know are sensualists who take pleasure in smell, taste, feel, and the beauty of real food. Tasting is the very best way to evaluate something. Oh my God, yuzu, I've never seen this. This is how you will develop your intuition and reawaken your ability to taste and discern. That's fantastic. You may think you know what a tomato or a carrot tastes like, but nothing compares to in-season, just-picked produce.
We're just starting to get into that transition time from the summer crops and moving into a little bit of the chicories and the escargots, broncos.
It should look and feel alive.
So that's kind of a love, yeah. It's really
Just looks like, like a rose.
yeah.
When you handle food that's alive and living, it will inspire you. Go to the market before you decide what to cook. Decide your menu based on what you find there. That will free you from an overdependence on recipes. Every day when we cook at Chez Panisse, it's almost as if we're doing it for the first time. We don't work from recipes. We see what we have to cook with and build a menu together. I do the same thing at home. Now, I've got this chicken that needs to be unpacked. A whole chicken with the head and the neck. And I'm just going to get a little tray for it to sit on right there, because I can always wash that. Let's see, I got some delicata squash, some persimmons that look just beautiful, some worn pears, some beautiful colored carrots, some plain yogurt from my favorite organic dairy, beautiful goat cheese. I got almonds. These fresh almonds from this year's crop of almonds that I'm going to roast. I got some olives, and then these beautiful raspberries. Some great looking Tokyo turnips, and some little fingerling potatoes that are in this bag. Little ones. Some brown rice from my favorite place. Radicchio. All of these wonderful fall lettuces fill in for anything that I don't have in my backyard. And I also bought the bottle of olive oil from McAvoy's Ranch. So, there we are. The first thing I'm thinking about when I come back is, what is the most perishable? So I'm just looking at all these ingredients and thinking to myself, the thing that I know absolutely is that I'm going to use these raspberries today. They cannot wait. Maybe these pears could take another day to ripen, maybe 2. The chicken can wait for another day. I would probably salt the chicken. It's Saturday, and I always have my friends over on Sunday. And so I'm thinking about that for tomorrow night. I'll probably make one meal with the chicken breasts, and I'll make a stock out of everything but the legs. Probably these beautiful little fingerling potatoes would be nice with the chicken. And one of the favorite things that we do at Chez Panisse is that we roast these almonds with sage leaves in the oven, and the almonds get very wonderfully seasoned, but the sage leaves get fried. And so it's very delicious with the almonds. And I very often warm up the olives with some lemon in there just to take the edge off it. And it's lovely to serve as with an aperitif, a glass of wine, to have the almonds and the olives together. I'm thinking about a lunch that I could have. Maybe it's an Indian lunch. Maybe I have some raita that I make with the yogurt and the rice and steam some of the turnips. Maybe I roast this delicata squash, taking these carrots too and making a carrot salad, cumin with the carrots. I'm just thinking, what could I prepare today that I might use tomorrow or the next day or during the week? But I know right now that I have meals here. That's how I plan. Simplicity, as in this lunch menu, is incredibly valuable. It doesn't mean you haven't thought something through. In fact, it's the reverse. You've thought it through so well that you can just do it simply. I decided I'm going to make a little lunch with all of these ingredients here. And I'm trying to really think about timing. What do I need to do right at the last minute? And what do I need to do ahead of time? I'm thinking of roasting the squash with some of this kaffir lime leaves from my garden. I'll just chop them up and put them in with the squash. While the squash is cooking, I'm going to make a carrot salad with cumin. That's perfect for the timing. And then I'm going to make a little raita, so that will go with all of these vegetables that I'm cooking. And I'm going to warm up the rice, add some coriander that I already chopped. And the very last thing I'm going to do is steam the turnips. When you roast something, it intensifies the flavor. And really, any vegetable is pretty much wonderful roasted in the oven, just with a little olive oil and some salt. And squash, it's exceptional. I'm going to take off the ends. And I'm going to peel it a little bit, but not too much. I love the kind of look of the whole vegetable after it's cooked. So I'm going to leave a little bit of the skin on there. And again, all scraps in my compost. What I'm going to do is cut this in half and cut it this way so that I don't endanger myself. And then I'm going to bring my compost over here and take out the seeds. And now I'm going to cut these in very even pieces. That's what's important, so that they all cook at the same time. If you cut them too thinly, they won't have the really beautiful, soft part in the center. I'm just going to cut up a little bit of this because I want it to release its oils I'm not being very careful about it because I'm going to take them out before I put the squash on the plate. Okay, and now I'm going to put the squash in the bowl and season it. I think I'll put these kefir limes in the bowl too. Leaves. Pour a little olive oil over. Some salt. A little bit more. Toss them. And then I'm going to lay them out on the baking pan. Maybe a little bit of red pepper flake too. Then I'm going to put them in a very hot oven. It's about 400 degrees. And they'll take, I'd say maybe 20 or 25 minutes to cook. It's amazing what happens to vegetables when they're simply roasted with olive oil and salt. Even the oddest vegetable that you can possibly imagine, like kohlrabi, is transformed when you cut it and roast it. The reason that I want to steam them is that this time of year, they are incredibly sweet. These are new turnips. They aren't the turnips that have been stored during the winter. And I would think about it very different. I might roast the turnips at another time. Now these are a little bit bigger than they were last week. And I'm going to still give put part of the stem, leave that on the turnip. Always looking for these little tags, organically grown. Then I know. Just quickly cut off the tops, and I'm chopping up the greens as well, so that when that time comes, I can do it very easily. And I'm going to take off the roots off the bottom. And steaming is the most delicate thing you can do. So if you want to preserve that great flavor, it's a perfect idea. And I remember when my daughter was about 5 years old, and I got the little spring turnips, the same kind, these Tokyo turnips. And she would want them after school. And I always thought that's a great time for kids to eat vegetables because they're very hungry right after school. So I just would cut up these turnips and steam them and the greens with them. And she would so happily have that just with olive oil and salt on it. She would eat a whole bunch herself. And so I know that this is something that's very appealing to people. It's got that little sweetness to it and a tang of the turnip. These are a little big, and so I'm going to cut them in quarters. Sometimes you can just leave them whole. You know, just look like they would be more bite size if I cut them. And I always like to, if you can, leave the top on. If it's edible, and I mean really delicious, to leave the top on. So you have the sense of that vegetable growing in the garden, especially when you serve it with greens. I'll turn on my steaming water. I have in this pot the steamer. And it's just a little metal colander in there with holes in it. And so the vegetables are not in the boiling water, they're just above it. When I steam vegetables, I don't want them to lose their life. So I prefer to steam small, tender vegetables that barely take any time at all. These are all those incredible heirloom varietals, which is, they're kind of a thrill to have them all together. And I never peel the carrots when I'm putting them in a stock. But when I'm making a salad, they have little furry edges and brown spots. I think they don't look so good. Of course, peeling them also really reveals the color. I really love to have very thin slices, but you need to have that flat side down, and then you cut these in slices that way. And then each one of those slices you're going to make into the little thin ones. This is one of those things to do that practice makes perfect. You know, you just get to know how to hold the knife and to do it. But I love to slice things differently. I mean, one thing I used to make all the time were carrot curls. And I used to take a carrot like this and make a little long peel. This used to be something that was very popular in the 50s. You'd see these at all the kids' parties. But it's a great thing to do. And you just put these into ice water and they just curl all up. They're adorable. And now I'm going to season this carrot salad. I'm not being precise about measurements, and you can adjust it to your own taste. But I know that I want to put cumin with carrots. That's something very traditional, both in Morocco and in India. And this is a little cumin salt. Put some wonderful olive oil on that. You can dress this salad ahead of time because in a way you want the carrots to soak in the vinaigrette. You can make this. You can just season it. Of course, I want vinegar in there too. Add a little, see whether you like it. Perfect. Like the carrot salad, there are other vegetables like celery root or peppers that make a beautiful julienne salad. Another way to use raw vegetables is to finely shave them. Thinly sliced on a mandolin or a vegetable peeler changes the way the ingredients come together, so the flavor and texture marry in a whole new way. I'm going to make this little yogurt sauce now. I'll make it right in the sriracha. And I know now that the garlic is strong. So I'm just going to use a half a clove of garlic. And I'll make this little sauce very useful to have. I'm going to put a little bit of salt in there, as always, to help grind up the garlic to a paste. And then I'm going to put a little yogurt in there. It's very plain yogurt, but it's so sweet and delicious. And it comes from the first organic dairy in the state of California, the Strauss family. So it's a very special place for me. Touch more salt. I'll put a little hot pepper in there too. I used to make yogurt myself. It's very easy to make. I will give you a recipe for making the yogurt in your workbook. It's very easy to do. I'm going to check on my steamer. I think I'll put this back here while I heat up the rice. A little olive oil in the bottom. While I'm patient for that to heat up, I'm going to put the turnips in the pot. The beans can just go in there in the bottom, and the turnips right on top with a tight-fitting lid. And up at high heat. I need to check on my squash. It's almost cooked. I just see the sort of brown color on it, and you can see the texture change. And if you have any doubt, you can take a fork and cut in half, and you can tell right away whether the squash is cooked. I'm so used to eating hot things and tasting them from being around the restaurant that I have asbestos fingers and I can quickly grab that. But you can always take a fork and just cut it and see how it feels. Okay, I think I'll put this rice in here. This is just cooked brown rice. It hasn't been seasoned. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit. Just turning it around, and again, I didn't put any salt in it before, and I'm going to do that. But the main ingredient is going to be the coriander, which I've chopped, that will flavor the rice. Sometimes I add a little bit of garlic, but it doesn't need it. It's really just lovely on its own. Indispensable tongs. Checking on my turnips back there. And turning down the rice, I'm going to add the coriander to it. I don't mind sort of cooking that into the rice a little bit. I think it's time to take out the squash. Looks like it's perfect. And I'm just thinking about how I want to serve it in platters to the table. I think it's nice when people can serve themselves what they would like. But sometimes I really want a plate to go together in a particular way. And so I will plate it. But today at lunch, I just think everyone can serve himself. Plate squash. They're right over there. I love these little shapes of squash. So charming. Trying to avoid getting that kefir lime. But I've never tasted a fried kefir lime. Not very good. They look so good. They smell fantastic. And I'm going to just put olive oil and salt on the turnips. They're really tender to the touch. And I think that turnips can be slightly undercooked. I don't like them when they change their texture and are very, very soft. These will steam a little bit more when they're on the plate. So I'm kind of anticipating that. But I like a little crunch in the turnip. Plate this beautiful rice. And I think what I'm going to do is pour some of this right around the edge. Like a little bit of delicious lunch of only vegetables. And what you're having is something that's very soft, like the yogurt, which makes a sauce for other things. And then the very crunchiness of the carrots, and then the squash, and the very distinctive flavor of the turnips sort of pulls the whole dish together. So, voila. Edit your collection of tools and equipment thoughtfully. Just like ingredients, invest in what you need and no more. I have very few appliances. I prefer to do things with my hands, which is part of the pleasure of preparing and cooking for me. I'd like to introduce to you my daughter Fanny. And she's always in my kitchen when she's home, and we cook together. And we're going to talk about the equipment that we use, or that I use all of the time. And I'm holding on to probably the most important one. It's the mortar and the pestle. It's almost therapeutic to be pounding garlic and basil and making a pesto. The aromas are coming up. You're smelling it as you're doing it, and it has a rhythm to it. And Fanny, bring over those sarabachis. These are Japanese mortars and pestles that have little grooves in the bottom. And so when I'm making a vinaigrette, I use this, and it very quickly really pulverizes the garlic. I guess many of them. They're very inexpensive, very utilitarian, this big one. And some of the other things that I use very often, another Japanese tool, it's called a mandolin. And it has different blades that go in there. But this one I kind of use all the time, and it makes little rounds very, very quickly. This has been an invaluable tool for just at the last minute to shave vegetables and to put something in the salad. I always need a wooden spoon, and this one's it burnt up a bit. I've used this one forever. And this amazing sieve, they call it a spider, or...
I call it a spider.
Do you call it a spider?
I mean, it does have that web-like quality about it.
No, but I take pasta out of the boiling water with it. I take beans out, vegetables, and it comes in all sizes. So that's really useful. And then this. I think it's an extension of my hand. I use this all of the time. They're incredible. And then I have the wooden version, and I use it at the table for serving a salad.
Yes, because metal things don't have too welcome a home in this kitchen. Almost everything is made, as you can see, of wood and copper. So you know if it's this color, it's really an invaluable tool.
But I think if you're using things every day, that they should be both useful and beautiful. And I think about that all the time. I don't want to use plastic implements. I want to hold real wood, and so I have a wooden chopping board. Very often I chop right on my table, And then, of course, there are whisks. Can you grab that little one down there? This one I love. I use it to make the vinaigrette or a mayonnaise. It really helps to bring it all together in the right way. It's special, a little tiny one. And then, of course, the peeler is indispensable. And a rolling pin is incredibly useful. This is a tiny one that I use for doing the little flatbreads, the whole wheat flatbreads, because they're a small bread, kind of like a little tortilla that I cook on the stove. And so it's really useful to have that one. You don't need very many knives, or at least I don't. I have a paring knife. I use this Japanese cleaver for chopping, and I need a bread knife or serrated knife.
They're good for tomatoes, actually, always. A little serrated knife is always really good for tomatoes, and also for taking the skins off of citrus. This is the knife that I kind of associate my mom using kind of every night at the end of a meal, peeling fruit. They're very affordable and kind of indispensable, but you need a few good, not expensive, but a few good sharp knives, and that's it.
It's true. I have a huge cleaver in my drawer here. But I just want to show you it because I got it on my trip to Russia back in 1984. And I carried this back. It was before they had regulations for coming into the country, I think. But it's just, I mean, it's for pounding too. And also as a cleaver to chop up bones. So every once in a while, I pull that out of the drawer. I have lots of these pans, the cast iron pans, and over there, bring over that copper one. It's an all-purpose saucepan, and this is a steamer basket, and it fits in all size pots, but I just put it in there like that. And of course, there's a need for a sheet pan for roasting vegetables in the oven. Kind of heavy. You don't want anything that's too light or it burns the one side without cooking the other. Indispensable. And for cooking pasta and beans, and you need a little bit bigger one.
And stock.
And stock. I have one that's a little larger than this, but this is my indispensable size that I use. And this is always good for using in the oven and serving at the table. It's really very useful. Can you put that one over there? And again, I like bowls that really have some history with them. Fanny's always looking for them around the world in secondhand stores. And so I have, when I'm mixing something, I'm really thinking about her or where it came from. And it's really important for me to have that sort of memory. You see all these tools here on the table. And I have to say, the most important tool is your hands. And I can't help myself. I'm just always tasting. I'm always feeling things, touching for ripeness. I'm tearing things apart for breadcrumbs. I'm pulling apart the cauliflower, the florets. I'm using my hands more than I'm using a knife, and stripping herbs from.
I mean, I think I always think of my mom as cooking this way in part because it gives you so much feedback and information about what you're handling and what you're cooking. Like, is that carrot really firm, or is it older and softer, or is this hot? Is it the right temperature? Is it, you get so much. We've just forgotten that we have the best tools are like attached to us already. You know how dressed, whether you've overdressed or underdressed a salad when you're actually touching the leaves. You get a lot of information just from engaging more in a more sensory way with what you're cooking.
Most important of all is my compost bucket. So this normally sits right here on the counter, and everything that can go into my compost, the ends of vegetables or eggshells or anything that's not meat or fish, because I'm taking my compost to my backyard garden.
I should add that my mom has started a compost bucket for me in every apartment I have lived in since I moved out of this house. You could tell she'd been there because a chicken stock had been started on the stove, and there was just like a little forlorn bowl of vegetable scraps that she could not bear to throw away.
You just feel like you're doing something so important for the planet to make compost. Someone told me that 1 square yard of compost saves 1 square yard of ozone. Now, whether that's true, I'm not sure, but I think of my compost bin as being about 1 square yard, and I have 2 of them. And as I layer up one, it's almost like making a cake, a little bit of vegetable scraps with a little bit of soil, some water, and then another layer of vegetables on top. And it's just important. How I stock my pantry allows me to cook in the way that I do, simply, and yet with great depth of flavor and spontaneity. Being prepared provides a shortcut to making something delicious in a hurry. In winter months, I especially rely on my pantry. We wrote a book together. It's called My Pantry. And she both contributed to the recipes, but she illustrated the book herself. And it's all of the things from our life here in the kitchen. And so it's filled with memories for me.
The way we talk about pantry in our family anyways is this very elastic notion. It covers herbs in the garden and berries that you might have frozen. So this was kind of a demystification of what the notion of the pantry means.
I really find that I can cook incredibly easily if I'm prepared. And I think about, whether it's, going to the farmer's market and thinking in advance about the meals for the week, or whether it's knowing that I have that pasta that's in my pantry or that rice. But it also makes your work so much easier. I never think of it as work because it's always a meditation for me. It's always a place of pleasure and inspiration. We separate out pleasure and work, and we need to put them back together again. I think of perishable ingredients like lemons, cheese, and eggs as part of my pantry too. This is a class about olive oil, really about olive oil, because it is the basis for all the cooking that we do at Chez Benny's, and it's absolutely the basis for the cooking I do at home. And there are so many olive oils out there, and how do you choose the right one? You have to taste them. This is a blind tasting. Here's a spoon for you. I put these 4 olive oils out. These are ones that we use at the restaurant. Now, these are all slightly different colors, and I don't know whether you can really see them. This is sort of a dark green in there. This is lighter, and these are much more yellow, and this is very pale yellow. I like my olive oils on the peppery side like the Italian Tuscan oils, but taste as many as you can and decide what you like. Keep in mind that you want 1 lighter olive oil for cooking and 1 full-bodied oil for sauces and finishing. These are all lovely. I think I would use them a little bit differently. I might use the lighter one for cooking and the really rich ones, I would say, for the salad.
If you were going into a grocery store and you were just looking, there are 20 oils, how do you make the choice?
I'm looking for a store that has a big turnover of olive oil, maybe more like a delicatessen, where olive oil is something really valuable. I also buy a small bottle and take it home and taste it. Try having an annual tasting party after the new oils come out in the fall. We do this at Chez Panisse. It cuts down on the cost when you taste in a group, and it will also help you learn together how to articulate what you're tasting. I'm looking for those words on it, from where it's from and how it's produced.
And also the year, right? Because
Yes.
that will tell you whether it was produced within the last year. I think, typically you want to stay within a calendar year of when it was bottled because olive oil is fragile. It oxidizes. And you can taste that really in the cooking.
And something important on this label is that it says that it's organic. In Italian, it's biologico. I have to tell you this story about Nan McAvoy and the McAvoy Ranch, because she decided to bring the olive trees, the varietal from Tuscany that made this oil, to California. She's both propagating the trees now and selling them to people all around. And she is also allowing people to come and bring their small quantities of olives and having them pressed at her ranch. And I can't say enough about how this has elevated the taste of olive oils in California. And there are many, many people now. It's important, at least for my cooking, to use a good red wine vinegar. I think we have gotten used to having a kind of sweet vinegar on our salads in this country and very quickly like the taste of the balsamic vinegar. And for me, it kind of spoils the salad to have it too sweet. I use the vinegar to give it that edge.
When you're looking for vinegars, it's often at the same outlets you'll find your good vinegars usually next to your good oils.
I'm always asking friends who make a good vinaigrette, where did you get your olive oil? What olive oil is it? And I'm asking that of restaurants too. I'm excited to know where it came from. I think people should feel very bold about and empowered to do that, to find out where the food comes from and what it tastes like. It's really important. I'm going to make you a vinaigrette right now. It is essential to know how to make your own vinaigrette. I always thought that salad dressing came out of the bottle when I was a kid, wishbone dressing with garlic in it and supposedly olive oil. But since I've been cooking myself, I've been making a vinaigrette with garlic.
What are the things that you're looking for when you choose garlic?
Always looking for firmness. Always looking for that.
That will change the taste so much of your vinaigrette to have if the garlic's a little bit off.
Well, I'm putting the garlic, I'm using a half clove because these are rather big cloves. And I'm putting it in my sriracha with a little bit of salt in there to begin. It helps grind it up, and I'm going to pound this until it disappears. When it's all a paste in there, then I know that I can add the vinegar to it. And it goes rather quickly from that half clove into this mush. It just kind of disappears in there. And what I'm going to do is add some vinegar. I'm making a salad, maybe for 4. With this much, I usually never measure it. And I put a little black pepper in there. Be sure the garlic gets all down in. What you're doing is you're macerating the garlic. You're taming it in the vinegar. And you're also want to taste it. It should taste good. This needs a little more salt in it.
The salt sort of is what helps you to taste the vinegar too.
Exactly. And so you're looking for kind of a balance. You want to taste it? Maybe a little more salt. But I can also tell that the garlic is...
It's spicy.
It's spicy.
Yeah, I've got some kick.
But knowing it's a kind of a spicy vinaigrette, I'm thinking about what kind of salad would be best to use with it. Maybe I might just use a radicchio,
Something, yeah.
that has that kind of bitterness to it. And I might even put a little anchovy paste into my vinaigrette. But I let it sit for a few minutes.
Good 10.
I'm letting the garlic calm down. I'm just using the vinegar to macerate. I'm just putting the olive oil in slowly, but because I don't want to put too much in. When you get too much olive oil, you lose the edge of the salad, if it's too oily. And so I want to get it just at that right place.
What are the proportions that you do typically? Like how much oil to how much vinegar?
I usually do 2 parts oil to 1 part vinegar, although I tend to like it, and Fanny does too, a little bit more on the vinegar
Like
side.
almost torture your guests with acid. Yeah. I think though, especially if you've had a meal that feels a bit heavier, having like a very bright salad at the end is such a nice way to finish. It's, it feels, you've always called it a digestivo.
I learned to eat salads after the meal when I lived in France. And it is that kind of break between the main dish and the dessert. And I use it for that purpose. I think the spices that we've chosen, they're grouped according to the countries that they come from. I think it's very useful to think about spices that way. I really like to use spices of a particular country because it marries all the dishes together. And so I'm just looking here at the ones from Mexico. These are some special chilies, some ancho chilies that a friend told us about that are smoked, and they have a very particular taste. A friend made them with a Mexican leg of lamb, and I didn't know why I loved the lamb so much, and then she told me the secret ingredient. So I always have those on hand.
They're great to put into beans too, right, to sort of flavor the broth.
The cumin seed is probably my favorite. And we're going to toast up a little cumin seed and make a cumin salt that I can just keep there on the counter all the time. I actually take it with me when I go on a trip. I have a little bag of spices, and so that when I get room service in the morning, I can sprinkle that on the top. It's really perfect. But these are some more coriander and a chili pepper and a very distinctive oregano from Mexico. And on this tray, it's more of Middle Eastern spices. I think a little bit going into India with saffron, another favorite. I love it in fish soups, love it in rice. It's just fantastic. Sumac, and this is a little Aleppo pepper, Marash pepper, paprika, turmeric, and this is a little thyme from the Middle East. Again, having a very particular flavor that's different from the thyme that we get here. It's a dried thyme. And these are some cardamom seeds. Finally, the sweet spices that I use most are cinnamon in the bark, vanilla beans, nutmeg, cloves, and some sweet anise seed. Salt is so important to the taste of the food, but it's been changed over the years because it's been packaged and processed, and we're looking for the really pure sea salt taste. And I'm always thinking of the parts of the ocean out there in Brittany, places where they gather the salt, and also in Sicily, as the places that I want to buy it from. Look for sea salt from clean environments. Real sea salt contains trace minerals that give it a stronger, saltier, more complex flavor. I keep 2 kinds of salt in my pantry. A coarse one for boiling water and brines, and a finer one for seasoning and finishing.
I think this is a really good point to make, is just how you buy spices. Like, what would you look out for?
First of all, as you probably guessed, I'm always looking for the word organic on the label. That's number 1. Because again, I want to support the people, no matter who they are in this world, who are doing the right thing with the land. No herbicides, no pesticides. So I'm looking for that first. And I'm looking for spices in a small amount, not really a big bag of them, because you can never use them in that amount of time, and they need to be in a tight container. So the smaller, the better. I'm sharing some of my favorite recipes that use these spices in the workbook. They're a great place to start experimenting with flavor and taste. I buy spices whole, as a rule, then toast them and grind them before I use them. It wakes them up. It's so easy to do this, and it sort of perfumes the house, the kitchen at least.
It's amazing how when they're uncooked like this, it smells of cumin, but barely. You know, the flavor and the smell comes out so much when you toast it on the stove. Again, a cast iron is the indispensable tool here because it distributes the heat around the pan so evenly that it keeps from burning the seeds in any one place. I'm going to put these cumin seeds in now because the pan is hot. Just sort of shake them around a little bit and lower the heat. But you can hear the seeds popping a little bit as they begin to heat.
You're looking for the cumin to just brown in that pan. And what we're going to do is put them in my favorite mortar here and grind them up. I think my favorite use of cumin salt is on eggs.
All right, I'm
Good.
going to give you these.
How much salt do we put in? Maybe about a teaspoon. I'm not measuring it, Tim. That's plain. And then I'm just going to grind it together. Smell.
God, that smells.
And when you put the salt in, it's coarse enough that it sort of helps break down the seed. And when you're tired of pounding, you can always give it to your daughter.
Yes, that's my role here.
Perfect. I have a little spice tray that I have by my stove all the time. And I have a little pot, especially for the cumin salt.
Do you want to try this and see if it has enough salt?
Yes. Yeah. It does.
Yeah.
Perfect. Let's put it right in the pot.
Sure.
I think it's just so great to really use the spices, especially those that you've roasted and ground and spent time with. I think we think they're a little bit for special occasions or for certain kinds of dishes. And I'm just saying that you can experiment and see what really is beautiful and what tastes great. The rices, I've only taken 3 that I use a lot. A risotto rice from Italy. It absorbs the liquid in such a great way. I just had some last night, and I was reminded of how special a risotto can be when you have a really good stock and it's just soaking it in, and the rice remains just firm, but so flavorful. The second one is a brown rice that we get from California. It was so delicious when I first tasted it, and Fanny brought it to my attention.
Just tasting different types of brown rice, you'll notice that one is not like the other, is not like the other, and that the freshness of the rice also will come through in how it's cooking.
This is the basmati rice, which is so, I think of it as kind of an elegant rice, a long grain rice, and very much part of Indian cooking. I remember the first time I had it was with Madhur Jaffrey, the wonderful Indian cook, and she boiled it on the stove, and then she took it. She didn't cook it completely, but she took some saffron and some butter, and she put it together and poured it over the top of the rice, and then she finished it in the oven. I just thought it was divine. I can't say enough about beans because they're a real staple in every country of this world. It's possible to make a pot of beans, and I often do it in my fireplace, and it can last for a whole week. And cooking them finely in different ways, you can put them into a gratin, put breadcrumbs on top. They're so beautiful. We've made salads where we mix them together, the different colors. You cook them separately, but then you mix them. And it makes for a beautiful meal during the wintertime.
What I always used to do, when I was a student especially, is I'd cook one pot of beans, and then I would actually use these different flavor groups of spices to change the beans each night. So sometimes I'd put them in a pasta and have a little, an Italian kind of pasta fagioli, and then the next night I'd put Mexican spices in them. And it was a way of having very cheap meals that tasted really full and really flavorful.
Over here are some lentils, both the dark green ones, the French ones, and these are some red lentils. And this is some local farro that is grown, and chickpeas are, again, something that's incredibly versatile to make hummus.
For example, your favorite hummus. Yes,
My favorite hummus
is always in the fridge, just always made from the dry chickpeas. There's a quality in canned beans, which are much more expensive too than making beans yourself, but they really take on a kind of tinny, objectionable taste. If you just soak beans, from the night before and make a fresh pot, it takes very little effort. The flavor is so different and so much better when you make them from scratch.
what's happening is a kind of artisanal revolution in terms of grains, and especially apparent in pastas. We have farro pasta now that is exceptional, really exceptional, and whole wheat pasta that is very special. I mean, just texturally. Before you'd be cooking it and all of a sudden it would kind of fall apart. And now they are made in such a way that you can cook them al dente. This is an egg pasta, and it's so golden because of the yolks of the eggs. You know, Fanny and I, when we would come home from a trip, would make a pasta. We call it coming home pasta because it would make us feel like we were really here. And I knew that we would have garlic on hand because we always do. And I was pretty sure there'd be some anchovies in the refrigerator and parsley from the garden, most likely.
The flavor of coming home pasta is like the thing I identify almost most with this house and with being with you. Like after being away for some amount of time, all you wanted was this flavor that was so familiar and so delicious and also so Spartan.
And then we go and sit down. I'd have a glass of red wine. I was home. Alongside high-quality staples from the market, I also like to make things for the pantry myself. You can quickly pickle the last bits of vegetables from the market that week. They taste delicious with grilled cheese or smoked fish. Wholesome pancake batter can be kept in the fridge up to a week. And I almost always have brown rice and sautéed greens available to use throughout the week. Fanny and I are going to make a very simple, quick pickle with the vegetables that we found in the farmer's market yesterday. It's a basic brine. It's got beautiful thyme and bay, garlic, coriander, clove, and hot pepper in it.
This is something you can do inside 15 minutes, you know.
And you can keep it for a month in the refrigerator. So it's just kind of always ready when you
perfect for that grilled cheese you love to have for lunch.
It's made with a pickling brine that has some sugar in it. So why don't you make the brine and I'll cut the vegetables.
I will. All right, I'm going to measure out 1 3/4 cups of water.
And I'm going to just cut up this cauliflower, taking the bottom off first and just cutting around because I want to keep these little florets. I'd like to keep them uniform in size so that they cook evenly.
Mom, I'm using a champagne vinegar. Is there a reason why we use champagne instead of, say, like a red wine vinegar?
It's more neutral than the red wine vinegar. It's one of those things in the brine that you're just trying to marry it so that it doesn't fall either too sour or too sweet.
But then when it comes to the spicing, you really can be a little bit more informal and spontaneous with your measurements. I mean, you can use a little pinch of chili and maybe a couple tablespoons of the coriander seed. Just clove are strong, so I usually use just 2, maybe 3. But when it comes to the herbs too, just a little handful or a few leaves. This is bay, that was thyme. 4 cloves of garlic for this recipe, which you'll peel and halve and add to the brine as well.
And these fresh vegetables are so sweet in the winter. They really have a great taste. But I'll cut up a few carrots. And again, what's important is that they are cut approximately to the same size so that they cook evenly. There are amazing colors of carrots. The heritage seeds have produced carrots that are red, carrots that are purple, carrots that are white, these yellow ones. I'm just seeing today that these are a sort of almost light orange color, peach colored.
They also have really different tastes, right? Like I find that some of the orange ones are sweeter, or the purple ones are earthier, but that's some of the excitement of tasting them.
I like the shape, but they could be really any shape. They could be long sticks. They could be round.
So this is just beginning to come to a simmer here. So I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit.
These peppers are probably my favorite ones. They're Jimmy Nardellos. They're very unique in flavor. They're sweet, spicy.
Shall I start with the cauliflower?
Yes. You can even put a little turmeric in there and turn everything orange if you wanted to. You can change the flavor of these pickles by using different kinds of spices and vinegars. I think you want to take the pickles out of the brine when they're soft, but not too soft. I mean, they have a little crunch to them.
Okay. I think then our cauliflower is ready. So I'm going to carefully take that out and put it into our expectant jar. And then we'll put the carrots in. The spider is the perfect tool for this.
But I love these carrots.
I'm just going to add these peppers at the end of the carrots now so that those just get a quick blanch. I think we're ready.
Okay.
They look gorgeous. The peppers were a nice thing to add in there. And then what's really nice is you get a little vinegar facial while you're doing this.
It is beautiful. You want to make sure that there's enough brine to cover all of the vegetables. And I think we just measured that perfectly. I dare say. This is a great way to have kids eat vegetables. In this country, at least, it's very rare to have just sautéed greens with a dinner. But in Italy, if you don't have sautéed greens, it's very unusual. They are just kind of part of the diet like a salad. And I got very used to eating them in all different kinds of greens. This is the kale that I just brought in from the garden. And I'm mixing it with a little bit of the frisee salad that came from the market. Take off any little end pieces. But this hardly even needs to be chopped up. So small and tender. And I'm going to just mix these two things together. And if the leaves were bigger, and it was a different kind of leaf, maybe a collard green, or maybe a charred leaf, a very big one, I might blanch it first in salted water. With some chicories, like escarole and frisee, I use the tender center of them for my salads, and I saute the rest. I cannot resist the taste of garlic and greens. It's just somehow they're meant to be together. My friend Tony, when we cook, he always says I never use enough garlic. I use 1 clove maybe for this. He would use 3. And in the end, he's kind of always right. When the garlic has had 3 or 4 months to mature, it gets much, much stronger. You know, we have a garlic festival every year at Chez Panisse on the 14th of July to celebrate Bastille Day. And we do every single dish with garlic in it. And we even bake the whole cloves, the whole garlic cloves, cut off the top. We put a little butter on it, and we roast them in the oven until they're really tender. And we serve it as a first course, just with grilled toast. So I have learned to use garlic both for health and for strong, wonderful taste. The Chinese say garlic is as good as 10 mothers. I love that. I have an Indian friend who puts ginger in the garlic mixture with her greens. I always wondered what that secret ingredient was. She finally decided to reveal it. But I want this garlic to almost disappear when I saute it. Cook very, very quickly. So I'm chopping it finely because this is going to cook 3 or 4 minutes at the most. And I want the garlic to be completely married with the greens. So I'm just very careful about the size of the mince. Okay, well that looks good to me. And I'm just going to turn on the pan and put a little olive oil in there. And I'm going to put the garlic right in, because I don't want to have to guess whether the oil's too hot and will immediately burn the garlic. I want to see it warm up. When garlic is burned, it's very acrid smelling, and you just don't want to eat it at all. We chop the garlic as we go along in the restaurant during the evening. We don't chop it all and try to use that all evening. We're constantly chopping it to order so that it's really fresh tasting. I'm just going to let this go for a little minute. It's just cooking with the oil and infusing its fantastic aroma. I'm stirring it around, and I always have my tea kettle nearby, because if I see that the garlic's getting a little bit too cooked, I might quickly add a drop or two of water to slow it down. I can see it's bubbling. I'm going to put a little bit of water in there just to make sure. And then I'm using these indispensable tongs to turn it around in the pan. And I'm going to use a little salt here and some hot pepper. I need to cook it really gently now. I put a top on. and just let it simmer for a few minutes. It's kind of steaming in there. And I'm taking a look at it, turning it around. I love that color of the frisee in the greens. I'm going to add a little bit more water. And it's all wilting down. I'm going to taste it. It was a little bitter. You can add a little vinegar. And I actually add a little vinegar just for that edge again. Kind of brings all the flavors up. It's amazing. It tastes so fresh, so delicious. That big pile of kale and frisee went down into this little tiny, delicious pile. So it's perfect for a dinner for two. Very often I make too much on purpose because what I want to do is have this in my refrigerator so that I can easily make something for myself during the week. And I might use the greens, warm them up, and do a little fried egg and serve them with the greens. If I'm in a big hurry, I might just take a tortilla, warm up the greens and put the greens in the tortilla for breakfast. I might have that, or lunch. And I mix it with rice. It makes a lovely dinner main dish like that. And it could be added to soups. So it's very versatile and, of course, incredibly nutritious. Here are some other things I make and almost always have in the fridge. I'll give you these recipes in your workbook. I'm going to show you a very, very easy dessert that I make when I have honey in my larder and when I have hazelnuts. Now, this is a ricotta cheese. This is one of the only cheeses you can make that just doesn't need enzymes, just needs hot water, vinegar, and salt. And it comes together and it makes these curds, and you put them in a strainer and the cheese is made. We're going to share this recipe with you in the workbook so that you can learn how to make that ricotta cheese. This one happens to be sheep's milk cheese that we get because I love that little different taste of the sheep's milk as it compared to the cow's milk. And I love the shape. And so I'm just going to cut a little piece of this, put it on my plate. It's so tender, it's so nice. And I'm going to talk to you about honey because we need to have bees making honey around the world. Right now, my favorite honey is from Portugal, and I just wrote it on the top of the jar. But it's very aromatic one. And, you know, the taste of honey comes from the flowers that the bees are closest to. One of the favorite first honeys I ever tasted was a chestnut honey from Italy. From northern Italy, and I'll never forget it. It's kind of bitter, and very, very dark in color. And I brought it back home and I insisted that we have it as a dessert for chez Panisse, just warming up the honey a little bit and pouring it on top of vanilla ice cream. It changes the ice cream, the warm honey. It's just fantastic. But this is kind of a little variation. I'm going to put some of this Portuguese honey on the ricotta cheese. And I just got these incredible hazelnuts from a ranch right on the border of Oregon and California. So I just chopped up a few and I'm just putting those on the plate as well. But after you toast them, they're incredibly crunchy, delicious with the honey and with the ricotta cheese. A lot of people really think that you have to do something fancy for dessert. And I'm just trying to sort of move away from that idea. I don't want something really rich at the end of a meal. I want something that might be a little surprising, something that is, sort of small in size, but just piques your interest. And this is kind of an unusual combination. You have a textural thing of the crunchy nuts, and then you have a really syrupy honey on it, and then you have that very creamy ricotta cheese. And so it just seems to go together. And it's not something that takes any time at all. That's the beauty of it. I've always thought that children only wanted those big white pancakes that come out of the mix, and that they wouldn't even try anything else that sort of looked slightly darker or different. But in fact, that's not true.
Yes, pancakes are a good gateway drug for whole grains for kids, I've discovered. So, and also my mom, she loves it. This was a way that we started to really use whole grains in our house. This recipe is incredibly easy to make. It's just has a few ingredients, and it uses oat flour that you make yourself. I mean, I think you would agree that so many flours that you find in supermarkets have been sitting there for a long time, and they can be a bit rancid or a bit stale. So the flavor really comes through with these oats. They have that really sweet, very nutty flavor. Yeah. This recipe just calls for 1 cup of flour. So you just put 1 cup of oats into the blender and blend on high for 20 or 30 seconds until you get a fine flour. But it doesn't need to be totally uniform. It can still have a bit of the oats visible in there. So there's only 1 egg in this recipe. Use the whole egg. It is 3/4 cup of milk. I sometimes use almond milk. This is whole milk. You can use any milk of your choice, really. These can easily be made without dairy if that's your preference.
I think probably Betty Crocker wanted us to all buy her cake mix. And so she gave us the impression that it was difficult for us to do it at home. Of course, that's not true.
The next thing that happens here is actually the fat. So we've already melted down a mix of ghee and coconut oil, which is a nice thing to have different types of fats for flavor and something, but you can also use butter. Butter is delicious always. Already melted that here, and you use 3 tablespoons of fat. It's always good to melt any fat that you're going to be using and adding into maybe a colder liquid like the eggs or milk beforehand, and let it temper and come up to room temperature, because otherwise it will immediately harden when it hits the cool milk. So this has been melted before, and we'll just add 3 tablespoons to the liquid there.
Well, I could measure the rest
Sure,
of these
please.
ingredients in. Half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of powder,
And then a full teaspoon of the
full
soda.
teaspoon. I'm just using my hands, the most useful tool in the kitchen, I think.
And then you take the dry and just add into the wet and whisk just until it kind of comes together. There's no need to try and overwork it or get out all of the clumps.
And then you're going to let it sit.
Yeah, so the oats will hydrate a lot with the liquid. And if you were to use it now, they would run and not quite stay together. So we let it sit for anywhere between 10 and 30 minutes to just thicken. In the meantime, we are going to make a quick little fruit compote to put on top of the pancakes, which is sort of somewhere between a fresh, fruit compote that my mom might make at the end of a meal and a kind of jam.
When you have fruit that's gotten a little bit too ripe, what we do is we'll just stick it in the freezer and use it for this purpose, because it's, and it texturally is not what you want to serve at the table, but I just put them on a sheet in the freezer like that. I mean, they could go into a bag as well, but they're very easy to pull out and use the amount that you want to use.
And that way they can stay distinct, which is nice if you're cooking it down, because even in this little jam, they won't cook all the way down. You'll still have the form of the fruit. And then we just use a little bit of water. And then depending on how ripe the fruit is, you might want a little bit of honey in there. So it's just a teaspoon or so of honey. And you just can let that simmer for a little while. It's such an easy forgiving thing. You want it to come out like a loose kind of jam so that you can kind of drizzle it almost in lieu of maple syrup, on a pancake. And you can start it on high and then just turn it down once it starts to boil a little bit. You don't need to be exact about how much water you use. And so we used about 3/4 of a cup of fruit, really just heaping a little teaspoon of honey in there. And it's looking good now. It looks like it's perfect for pancakes.
You can also turn overripe fruit into a little sauce or syrup. Warm it gently with a little sugar or honey for the sauce, or strain it for a syrup.
Usually there is a sacrificial pancake at the beginning. Hopefully I will avoid that with you.
But you preheat the pan, and it's important to do that, because if you put the pancakes in a little too soon, they just run immediately, and the heat helps them to sort of seize up. But the great thing about this batter is that it can keep up to a week in the refrigerator. So you can multiply this recipe out a number of times and just have it on the ready.
So we're going to use this big cast iron pan. Cast irons behave like nonstick pans when they're well seasoned. We will use, nonetheless, a little bit of the melted ghee that we had from earlier, just to coat the pan to make sure that that those first few pancakes don't stick.
I think the cast iron pans are really, really valuable because they're thick and they're holding the heat in a certain way. I love to cook just about everything in them. I cook vegetables in them, I cook obviously pancakes in them, but they're indestructible. But you have to take care of them. We always, immediately after use, you clean them out, and then you put them on the fire just to dry them, and make sure that it's oiled. I put a little olive oil and just rub it in, and that's it.
I think we're ready to try the first few. So we make them very small, just kind of little sand dollar shape. The pan's now nice and hot.
Has a little sizzle.
So actually we can turn it down to low now. And then just put 3 in here to begin. And you can see the pan's warm and the batter is just beginning to bubble kind of right away. And you want it to come to all these little bubbles all around before you even consider flipping them. That sort of signals that they're cooking on the bottom side. You'll begin to see also that the edges firm up a bit and darken, and that means that they're getting towards flipping time. And then you can sort of gingerly check too to make sure. Oh. Yeah, no, they're looking
Yeah, they're good.
looking good.
Petite.
Yes. So the pan was actually perfect, and I have, I think, possibly avoided that terrible first pancake that you have to eat while no one's looking.
I used to make buckwheat crepes all of the time. After I went to France, I fell in love with those big pancakes, very flat, very thin, that you could get on the streets in Paris. And ended up going out to Brittany and watching them being made with buckwheat flour. And I thought, actually, before I opened Chez Panisse, that I wanted to have a little creperie in Berkeley. And so...
This is still the retirement plan.
Right across the street from Chez Panisse. Sometimes Fanny blends a little buckwheat into the oat flour. It's kind of almost like a little sour taste brings to it.
I think these are just about done.
Okay. And it's very good with the dark berries, like huckleberries or blueberries.
You can see that it's really more of a syrup almost than a jam. You can sort of pull out the fruit and then drizzle a bit of the juice.
Should we
try that?
We have to. It smells fantastic. Delicious. Tending to plants changing throughout the seasons is a delicious meditation for me. It's deeply satisfying to harvest, prepare, and eat food that you've grown yourself. These are bay leaves. It's something else that I think about, is having trees in my garden that don't need a lot of care. I can't believe I've got these beautiful Meyer lemons still on the tree. These are the sweet lemons. It's a varietal that seems to grow extremely well in gardens all around Berkeley. And I just love to be going out and picking them, but these are the last two. I don't have a huge tree, but I love having the leaves of the citrus. And I have a kefir lime. I rarely get limes, but I get these incredible leaves. And they can be used like in a curry. They're very interesting looking leaves. We're gonna roast the squash in the oven on the kefir lime leaves. And then, of course, there's bay, beautiful bay. Aromatic as well, indispensable in stocks. Beautiful aroma. Again, I throw it in the fireplace when it gets dry. Perfumes the whole room. We have made this rather delicious bay leaf custard. Cream custard, again, seeping the leaves in the actual cream. And it takes on the perfume. We do this very often at Chez Panisse in the fig leaves. One of the great ice creams that I love at the restaurant actually came from the chef Russell Moore. He burns these leaves in the fireplace, and then you put them in the cream, and you have a taste of almost like toasted coconut. Almost like that flavor. We wrap fish in the fig leaves and then put it on the grill, or it can actually go right in a pan over the fire. And another thing we do is take goat cheese, wrap it in the fig leaves, and bake it in the oven. So I'm thinking all the time about how to use all the parts of the plant. Now I have a very small garden, maybe about 10 feet by 10 feet. I want to grow things that I can't find in the farmer's market. I can find things like garlic, and I can find these beautiful radicchios at the farmer's market. But it's very difficult for me to find some of the really fragile herbs. And I want to be able to go out in the garden and just grab them when I can. And I have chives. And I have parsley, indispensable, parsley and cilantro, coriander. I use them all the time. And so I have a lot of that going. And I love to make salsa verde with these herbs, and you need quite a bit to do that. Probably the herbs that I go after every evening are the mint, and I have lemon verbena in the summer and in the fall. In the winter, it dies back, and I cannot make that mix of tea that I love to have at the end of dinner. I take some boiling water and I pour it over the fresh mint leaves and, if possible, a little bit of lemon verbena, and I let it sit for a few minutes, and then I serve that at the end of practically every meal that I have at home, and it's a part of the ritual of chez Panisse as well, to give that sort of taste of freshness at the end of a long meal. Tisane is a French word for an infusion made by simply pouring boiling water over herbs and leaves. When lemon verbena isn't growing, I use these combinations instead. But I also grow the herbs that will go all winter long. They're rather the strong herbs that I have fallen in love with. Rosemary. Love it. I sometimes just strip it down and skewer meat on it and cook it on the fire. I fry in olive oil the rosemary, the actual leaves of it, and just for a few minutes in olive oil, and it crumbles up, and you can put it as a little taste at the end of a pasta, or you can mix it with breadcrumbs. It's beautiful that way. It just gives a lift to the end of a dish. When we started frying herbs at Chez Panisse, it really changed our cooking. Frying herbs is a wonderful way to heighten the flavor of the dish at the last moment. It mellows the taste of stronger herbs like rosemary and makes pizza extra delicious. Thyme is an indispensable herb in my garden. I use it always in making stocks. It's just, again, one of those aromas that is great for marinating meats. Really great. And then there's savory. There's summer savory and winter savory, and right now I'm getting the winter savory, which is stronger, and it's such an important herb in the south of France. They season the beans with the savory, and it's such a unique flavor. I do differentiate between the really softer herbs, the ones that I would use in a salad, like chervil and chives and cilantro and mint. Those are all ones that could flavor a salad in a lovely way. But there are the really strong herbs that I want in the marinade, and those are the rosemary and the thyme and the savory. They're much stronger and really have that pronounced flavor. You have to think about how you're using them. I want to always have a mix of both in my little backyard garden or my window box, whatever you might have. Even if you don't have a garden, try a few herbs like this. It's a delight to have something green growing in your kitchen. I'm going to teach you how to make a very simple sauce. It's called salsa verde, an Italian sauce, a green sauce made out of green herbs. And I use it a lot to just, again, bring up the flavor. It's sometimes with a fish, sometimes with a piece of chicken. Sometimes it's just, almost could dip a vegetable in it. It's basically just shallots, maybe capers, which I love, maybe even anchovies. I'm going to do this one without anchovies. I'm going to use the parsley from my garden. And again, just picking the leaves off, not extremely carefully. It wouldn't hurt if it had a stem in there or two. But I'm roughly doing that. And I'm going to use the chives as well. It's basically just a vinaigrette variation because it has both olive oil and vinegar in it. But the primary look of it is green because it has all of this parsley. Could have chervil in it as well. But because of the capers, I don't want to waste the chervil. I'd rather have the chervil in my salad as that kind of little anisey flavor than to lose the taste of the chervil with the salsa verde ingredients. Sometimes when I'm serving it with like a lamb chop, you might want to put mint in the salsa verde. I might even do it with the tops of fennel if I'm really thinking about a fish dish. A traditional Italian salsa verde has olive oil, lemon juice, parsley, and capers, and sometimes a little chopped anchovy. We've taken that idea and come up with other variations. I'm going to dice up the shallots next because it's really nice to have them macerate a little bit in the vinegar because it tames the strength of the strong flavor of the shallot. These are amazing shallots. They're just so firm. Feels like they just came out of the ground. But I'm probably going to use about half of a shallot. So I'm cutting off one end, leaving the other one intact. Works better with my fingers. But the idea is to make a little tiny dice. And to do that, you have quite a sharp knife, and you're making horizontal cuts that go almost to the end. And the root is holding it all together. Now I'm going to make incisions that go right down, holding it together as I go. And then the little trick is to cut this piece very, very finely so that you get little cubes of shallots. My eyes are tearing as I'm cutting, but you can always wash your hands in cold water afterwards. But there we have our little dice of shallots. And I'm going to put these right in the bowl. that. And I'm going to put some vinegar over the top and put all those shallots way down in there. A little bit of salt. That always helps with the taming of the shallots. And just let it sit there while I chop up the rest of the herbs. And again, chopping just comes by practice. I love this kind of knife because I can sort of scoop things back up on the spot as I'm doing them. I kind of like hearing the rhythm of it. This wants to be quite fine because you're wanting the sauce to come together, you know. It wants to be very green. And a great addition to it is a little lemon zest. I think that looks good. I'm going to put that in my bowl. It's good for taking the little last bit off your hands. And these are the chives from my garden. Just going to slice those finely. It's a beautiful little scoop. Now I'm going to chop up a few capers. They have been rinsed in water to take off any excess salt because capers are normally packed in salt and you just don't want the whole thing to be too salty. So maybe this is about the right amount. Again, I think I will put in half of it and taste it and see whether it really is. It's like when you're putting garlic into something. Just keep part of it out and make sure that you want the last bit of garlic in there. Okay, so I'm just going to take a little bit of that. Then I'm going to mix this all together. And you can see this is a very green sauce. Adding olive oil, of course. And now, I'm just going to taste it. A little bit more oil. Perfect. Little lemon. I have one of these wonderful little zester wands. I'm looking to have it taste like something that's not really about shallots, not really about capers, not really about each individual thing, but it's coming together to be something else. And right now, the last taste, I want a little more salt in it. It's more of an oil-based sauce that has pickled shallots in it. Think of it that way. The salt helped. Just needed. I'm serving it in the bowl that my daughter made. So it's really great. While I'm thinking about that, this was the salt container that one of my mentors left to me in her will. And it's a salt container from Elizabeth David, from her house. So just makes me feel very connected with a big tradition of cooking. When I was in France the first time, you go to the market and you'd see a big tablecloth almost with a mix of salads about this high. And my friend Martine would just take handfuls of that. She'd bring them home, and she made a dressing out of anchovies and garlic. And in that salad were things like this rocket. I have little tiny rocket that I have here, and chervil, which all of these have very strong, distinctive tastes. It always had a little frisée in it as well, sometimes dandelion greens, but it was the salad that the farmer just picked as he walked down the rows. And so it could even have some red oak leaf in there. I think of it as the Japanese mesclun salad because I brought so many seeds home from France that at the beginning I didn't know where I was going to plant them. And then I had this idea. Why don't I just turn the backyard of my house into a mesclun salad garden, and we could really have the real salad at Japanese. And I did that. It's a kind of salad that you can cut it and then it grows again. It's an intensive use of space. The amazing thing about cut and come again lettuces is that you can harvest their leaves several times before they become tough or bitter. Then there's this little speckled salad, again a European varietal that we started planting. And I now include that in my own personal mesclun mix. And radishes. Sometimes for the first course at the restaurant, we might have just a little bouquet of radishes and some butter, just like the French do, a little coarse salt. It's really great to have these secret things in the garden that children can find. And when Fanny was a little girl, I used to plant fraise de bois, the wild strawberry that has white and red berries. And I used to just hide them around the garden. And she would find them. And she'd just eat out of the garden. We also made a bean teepee. And the beans would grow up and it would make a little house. And she just would go inside this little house and pull the beans off and eat them raw. And it's amazing how children, like raw vegetables when they can pick them themselves. It's all about their own empowerment and that they feel like they found it. The last thing I have here are two kales, a Russian kale and a dinosaur kale. These kales, these little baby kales, are so easy to saute with a little garlic and olive oil. And I use them, mix them with rice. It's not really enough to make, a side dish for a lot of people coming to dinner. But it's enough for me to have, for a couple of people for a lovely lunch. And because it's so small and tender and delicious, it takes no time at all to cook. It's sort of one of those very spontaneous last-minute things. I love to wash salad. I don't know why. I guess it's because I get to really look at all the lettuces, and I get to mix the colors, and I like to do it in the water. I'm going to show you the most romantic way to wash salad. It's not the way I always do, but it's the way that my French friend Martine taught me. Cut off the ends, the little ends of the salad, and you put them in lots of water. This is the red leaf lettuce. I'm going to do that little speckled one, and all the time you're kind of examining them for leaves that are a little bruised or not perfect. You can just put them aside. I'm looking for the texture. Some things are much more, stronger and almost support the salad, like radicchio and like this frisee. So it's great to have them, and I don't like to cut them. I really like to tear them almost as if they came from nature that way. It's not that I don't like sometimes to have like a chopped salad and where you're cutting the romaine leaves, with a knife. But for a mixed salad like this, and for my little mesclun mix, I want to really have the sense that it just grew like this and it just got picked. I'm putting some chervil in it. I don't want the little stemmy part, so I'm taking that off. But I love the leaves, the branches, and I'm sort of sorting it as I'm doing it. I like big leaves and small leaves, and even some mint leaves I'm going to put in the salad. They're much stronger flavor, but I think they would be really nice. And of course, my little end of my rocket. I think I'll take off some of these stems. Just put the leaves. It's very spicy, the rocket right now. And again, a little bit of frisee because the color is astonishing. This little inner part that is yellow. And it's just beautiful. And I'm just kind of tearing it as I go. I'm just washing it. I'm looking at it, though, too, to make sure there isn't a lot of dirt on it. If there's a lot of dirt on the salad, you probably want to wash it twice. But this seems very, very clean. Now, my friend Martine has one of these strainers with a handle on it. She goes out the back of her door and she just shakes it. She shakes it dry. I can't quite do that, but I'll go like this. Of course, you can use a salad spinner. I love to always dry the salad. Even if you do it in the salad spinner, you need to dry the salad because you want it to take the dressing in a right way. And if it's wet, the salad kind of wilts and you can't taste the vinaigrette with it. And I just lay that out. Again, I can shake it a little bit more. And then I lay out the leaves very carefully, kind of in. Again, I'm examining it as I go. And this looks much more like a fall salad now. Then what I'm going to do is fold this part over and very gently now. And then what I do is I just roll it up very gently. And I can put this little package in the refrigerator, and when it's time to make the salad, I just take it out. I want to bring you into Chez Panisse to show you how the values of my cooking at home translate into a restaurant. It really is an extension of my home. One of the things that makes Chez Panisse unique is that all of the cooks taste the dishes together. It's an opportunity for dialogue, for training our palates, and learning to put words around what we're tasting. Like I do at home, we write a daily menu that is based on what's the very best that particular day. And we prepare the dishes simply so that they taste of what they truly are. These are two dishes we do over and over again at Chez Panisse. They are challenging recipes, but when you make them again and again, they really become second nature. It is really a treat to watch our pastry chef, Carrie Lewis, make this dough with ease and skill. Carrie has the flour, salt, and sugar pre-measured in a bowl. The sweet butter is cut into half-inch cubes and chilled. She is gently coating the butter with flour and pressing it into flat pieces. Carefully drizzle in 1/3 of the ice water, stirring with a large fork. You want to integrate it completely before adding any more. Continue to drizzle in water and work it in with a fork. You want to toss the mixture, not mash it. Carrie is pressing the dough very gently together to test if she has added enough water. It should start to get a little ropey texture, which means the dough should have enough water to just come together with a gentle squeeze, but no more. This kind of tearing and stacking creates butter layers that eventually make a flaky crust when it's baked. The final motion is to knead it very slightly to pull it together. We find it easier to master this dough if you make it in slightly larger batches, so that there is more wiggle room to get the texture right. Wrap the dough and let it rest in the fridge for at least 30 minutes to give the gluten in the flour a chance to relax as the dough continues to moisten. We remove the dough from the refrigerator about 10 minutes before rolling. If it is frozen, give it 15 to 20 minutes. It should be cold, but not so cold that the butter chunks shatter when rolled. If it is too cold, the edges will crack and split while you're rolling. If it is too warm, it will be too soft and unmanageable. It will also absorb too much flour and melt the chunks of butter. Unwrap the dough, flour the counter, lightly and evenly. Place the round of dough in the center of your floured area and dust the top of the dough with flour. Press down on the dough ball to expand the circle. Carrie is using a dowel, but I prefer to use a rolling pin. Turning the dough frequently ensures that you're rolling it evenly and that it is not sticking to the bottom. Start to roll from the center outwards, continuing to rotate the dough frequently to keep that circular shape. If any cracks are opening on the edges, Make sure to pinch them together, or a small crack will become a big one. Dust with small amounts of additional flour if anything gets sticky. Keep rolling until the dough is very evenly thin and round. Now brush off the extra flour. If it is absorbed, it will make the dough tough. Fold the dough in half. Start by brushing flour off from the top and brush off the bottom. Then fold the dough into quarters and transfer it onto the parchment paper. You can chill the rolled dough if it seems to be getting too warm to handle. Make a small border with a ring of apple slices. It defines the fruit boundary, and it ensures there will be enough fruit at the edge to curl the dough around it later. Put a very thin layer of frangipan, an almond paste mixture, or a mixture of sugar and flour on the bottom. This will help absorb the extra juices from the fruit and seal the bottom, as well as adding a beautiful complementary flavor. Arrange the slices of apple so that there is an even layer of fruit. You can play with lots of patterns here, herringbone, concentric circles, and stripes, as long as the fruit is evenly distributed. Now carefully curl the dough around the edges, pinching and stretching the dough to encase the outside. We don't want to do big folds because it can make creases for juices to escape, as well as create extra layers of dough that will bake unevenly. Brush the apples with melted butter. This helps the apples brown. Then brush the outside edges of the crust with butter. Sprinkle the crust liberally with sugar. Very lightly sprinkle the apples with sugar. The amount of sugar will depend on the tartness of the fruit. For example, rhubarb and apricots require more sugar than apples. This combination of sugar and butter will caramelize once it bakes. Using your hand, brush away any extra sugar from the parchment. Otherwise, it can burn and make the tart stick. I like to trim the excess paper off as well. Preheat the oven to 400. We have a deck oven at the restaurant, but you can bake yours on a pizza stone or on a pan in the lower third of your oven. While it bakes, turn the tart a few times to make sure it's baking evenly. You want it to be dark and caramelized. Peek at the bottom of the dough to make sure it's golden. If it's undercooked, it can taste raw or get soggy. As soon as it's done, slide the tart onto a rack for a few minutes. It will help the bottom crisp up.
Has a lot of apple flavor, and it also gives it a lovely shine. These are our Pink Lady apples.
Pink Lady.
Yes, one of our favorites. We look forward to this apple. It has
such a beautiful color, aren't
It's
they?
so true. And they have a delightful acidity, and their texture retains its shape throughout the bake. It doesn't become applesauce in the oven, and we love that.
And my favorite,
The huckleberry ice cream.
huckleberry ice cream. It surprises people so much to see that color on the plate. So let's see
The
what
drama.
it tastes like. But the drama. It was so beautiful. I think it's just the amount of bright sweetness to the galette. It's really nice. You might even put on though a little bit more
Just a touch
glaze.
more.
Just almost like, yeah, like that.
It's a really nice flavor.
Yeah, it is. You know what I mean? Just gives it
Absolutely.
a little bit of touch.
Popped it up.
Beautiful. Okay.
Thank you, Alice.
This is Brian Bly, our longtime cafe chef. Brian has spent time in Italy studying the finer points of pasta making, which will become very evident when you watch him practice his craft. The ingredients for this filling are very simple: ricotta cheese, olive oil, salt, pepper, green garlic, and thyme. We get these big, beautiful rounds of sheep's milk ricotta from Bellwether Farms. You can also make your own ricotta with cow's milk, and I'll tell you how in your workbook, as well as offer other ideas for filling different kinds of cheeses to use as well. Brian is filling a piping bag here because we make a very large quantity of ravioli. But at home, you can just use a spoon. Our base recipe for pasta is 1 cup of flour to 1 egg and 2 egg yolks. Here Brian is making a double batch. Brian is using mostly all-purpose organic white flour with about 1/8 of durum flour. The all-purpose flour helps with elasticity so that the dough stretches. The durum flour helps the dough hold together. Add salt and make a well in the center of the flour mixture for the eggs. Then add the yolks. Then you carefully whisk with a fork, pulling in a bit of the flour from the edges and adding olive oil. Then using a scraper, work towards the center, continuing to mix and cut. Once the dough starts to come together, use your hands to press the dough together and knead it for a few minutes. This develops the gluten and fully hydrates all of the flour. Once you learn the feel of the dough, you will know it if it feels too dry or wet. We like it on the dry side, so he is adding a bit more flour while kneading, using the scraper to work in the little bits of dough. Wrap the dough and let it rest for about 30 minutes. Keep in mind, the dough will continue to moisten as it sits. Most people who are new to making fresh pasta dough make it too moist, which makes dough that is hard to work with. Lightly flour the dough in your work surface. Roll the dough out evenly with a rolling pin, just enough so it fits in the widest setting of the pasta machine. The pasta machine Brian is using is a home-size Atlas hand crank. It has 2 rollers that flatten the dough and 6 thickness adjustments. The dough should be dry enough that you aren't concerned with the dough sticking to the rollers. If it is too dry, you can let it rest between roller reductions or spritz it lightly with water. When you fold the dough again, narrow enough to fit through the rollers, it's called laminating. This process continues to develop the texture of the dough. It's amazing how much pasta you can make with just a few cups of flour and a few eggs. This pasta is the right texture, so Brian doesn't need to keep adding flour. You can tell because it's easy to handle and not too stretchy. Once you have a pasta dough texture you want, you can switch to rice flour because it doesn't get absorbed into the dough. This piece is getting quite long. If that happens, it's fine to cut it in half. Otherwise, it can become challenging to manage. Remember, for ravioli, you want the pasta thin because it will be doubled over when it's filled. These sheets of pasta can be made into many shapes. Handkerchiefs, tortellini, wide noodles, linguine, even angel hair. Sometimes we even roll whole leaves of herbs between the sheets. Brian is lining up the pasta sheets so that he can assemble the pasta quickly and easily. He pipes about 2 teaspoons of filling into each ravioli that equals about 1.5 inches of empty space around each dot of filling. Most days at the restaurant, before we go into production on a large batch, we assemble a few ravioli, boil them off, and taste them to see if we like the thickness of the pasta and the seasoning of the filling. Now Brian does a very light spritz of water. This is how we get the pasta to stick to itself. He then folds the dough in half very evenly. Starting at one end, he carefully presses down the pasta to seal the raviolis. It is essential to press all of the extra air out so that the ravioli don't float too much or cook unevenly when you boil them. Brian is using a brass ravioli cutter that both cuts and pinches the pasta together. For a dinner portion, we serve 5 to 6 ravioli per person. We always make them the same day that we serve them. If you need to store them for more than a few hours, put them on a sheet pan lined with parchment and cover them with a dry towel. Brian has oiled and seasoned the mushrooms and is gently grilling them. You can also cook them in a pan with olive oil. Tear the mushrooms into small pieces so that they relate to the size of the ravioli. Brian made a broth from the mushroom trimmings by sautéing them with onions and covering with water, then adding a bay leaf and some thyme and simmering it for 20 minutes. You can also use an enriched chicken broth made by browning chicken bones, covering them with chicken stock, and simmering them down. Warm the broth slightly and swirl in some cold butter to emulsify it. Use a big pot of salted water so there is plenty of space for the ravioli to move around while they're cooking. Fresh pasta cooks quite quickly. It only needs 3 or 4 minutes depending on its shape. Brian is tasting the sauce and checking the doneness of the ravioli by trimming off a little corner. This plate is part plate, part bowl. It's flat enough that you can see everything in one layer, but cupped enough to hold some broth. Brian garnishes with a rich olive oil and then finishes this dish with gremolata, a dry mixture of parsley, garlic, and lemon rind. When you add that mixture to the hot broth, it becomes very fragrant. This grater has a nice blade for shaving the Parmesan. You can also use a vegetable peeler to shave the cheese. We're tasting with Amy Densler, our chef in the downstairs restaurant.
Looks beautiful,
Thank
Brian.
you.
Bon appetit.
I was just thinking when you were doing it that the big pieces of cheese a little bit obscure the. I wondered
you want
whether
it
it
in
was a
every
little bit
bite,
grating.
probably, no?
Grated. Yeah, I was just thinking that. I don't know how you feel about
I know
that.
how, yeah, we talked about that before. So you get it in every bite.
Yeah,
It is smoky.
delicious. Really nice. Love the grilled
Chanterelle.
chanterelles. Yeah, wonderful.
The ricotta filling really lets it shine.
I think there wants to be enough juice in there so that they.
There is enough, or there
No,
needs to be more?
there might want to be a little.
Let's put some more in.
That's good. Yeah. Just so that you have it with everybody when you're doing it.
Yeah, I love how you cut the chanterelles so they're really shows off their shape.
Shape and texture and, and all that.
I think I have to have another bite just to make sure.
Second opinion.
But I think people don't ever taste the texture of the chanterelle. It's so important to know that they're fresh. And even if, sometimes they get so cooked that you can't tell that they were just sort of picked nearby up in the hills.
They're meaty. They're meaty and chewy and goes well with the al dente pasta.
Okay. Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great.
The idea of serving simply a bowl of fruited Japanese seems audacious to some people, but I embrace that audacity. You don't need a restaurant or a copper bowl. I challenge you to find what is perfectly in season and ripe, and then just slice it, taste it, and serve it. The writer, Michael Pollan, came to the restaurant a while back, and he was looking down to the desserts at the restaurant, and he saw the galette, and he saw the profiteroles with huckleberry ice cream, and then he saw a fruit bowl. He said, it almost costs as much as the sweet desserts. What could this be? And at that time, it happened to be peach season. And so he had the peaches from Masamoto's trees. And we had sorted those peaches very, very carefully. And we only want the ones that really make an impression. So we had the peach there in slices. And he took one bite. And it was unforgettable for him. He talks about the fruit bowl all of the time. And that's exactly the effect I want to have. I'm going to put together a fruit bowl that we serve at Chez Panisse every day. It's about how we go about choosing the food that we serve at Chez Panisse and the food that I cook at home. Now, I have these persimmons, the Fuyu persimmons, right in my backyard. I have 2 trees. And so I have the opportunity to pick the leaves from the trees, and they become part of this fruit bowl. And I just want to make sure that they are ripe. I always cut them and taste them. You're tasting and you're tasting and you're tasting. And food is a living thing. And so you really have to know that after it's picked, it's always changing every day. And so you're always wanting to taste first. So I'm thinking definitely I want to put this on the fruit bowl. Of course, at this moment in time in the fall, I thought surely there are grapes, but I went looking for them. And in fact, there's only this varietal of grape. And when I take a really close look at it, I realize that it was picked some time ago. You can see the little stems have turned brown. And even though it's a beautiful organic fruit, it doesn't look alive to me. I'll taste it just to make sure that it's not worthy of the fruit bowl. But I love the look of it. I like different shapes. And So I brought it anyway. I think we will make these into sherbet. They are not good enough to put on the fruit bowl by themselves. In fact, they're a little tart. And for sherbet, that can be a very good thing because you're adding sugar to it. And then you can bring forth the taste a little bit more. Let's see what we'll put in there besides the persimmon. I think maybe a pear. Now again, there are many, many, many varietals of pears and of apples. This is a Basque pear, and it has a very distinctive texture. It's much more firm. It's much harder. But actually, it's quite delicious, quite tasty. And it should be kind of juicy. You'll know whether a fruit is ripe just by tasting. If it's too sour, you put it aside and think of something else you can do with it. Now, I would take that Basque pear and I might slice it up and use it for a salad. I'd mix it with chicory lettuce and I'd make a vinaigrette and maybe I'd put a few nuts in there. But I'd use it differently because it's not for the fruit bowl. And then we come to this beautiful pomegranate. They're everywhere at this time of the year in the markets. I think both on the east and west coast I see them. They're ripe when they're a little tender on the outside and when they have that dark red skin. It's really great. I'm just going to cut into one and break it apart. They're very juicy. But look at these beautiful seeds glistening. They can be juiced, and it makes a wonderful pomegranate syrup. Or even granita, that little frozen ice. But these are seeds that you can eat. And they're also seeds that stain your hands. I probably would put a little bit of this on to the fruit bowl right at this time because I think the color is so amazing. And once you make a cut, you can just kind of pull them apart. I'm going to have to put this satsuma unpeeled onto the fruit bowl. I think I want a few more persimmon leaves in there too, just because they are so beautiful. And I'm going to find maybe a few days in the winter when there aren't so many fruits for us to choose from. We go to the desert in Southern California, and these are the dates, the barheat dates that we get. The Flying Disc Farm grows all kinds of organic dates, all different varietals. But this one is very creamy and completely unusual. And they have a kind of sweetness that is irresistible. Now, you think this is a simple process of finding beautiful fruit and putting it in a bowl, but it is really a way of expressing ripeness, of seasonality, of purity. It is an expression of what we have discovered today. And we've discovered it because we were willing to taste. It's a way of being in time and place. So I'd like to wait. I'd like to anticipate. I like to look forward to the spring and the summer. And then what's happening in the fall. And then what I can do in the winter. The colors of winter can be as beautiful as summer. The white, orange, red, purple carrots, radishes of every color and shape, the living greens on the tops of radishes, carrots, even cauliflower, will tell you how fresh the vegetables are. The green should be really healthy and not wilted at all. In the winter, we have chicories, chard, and collards, and kale, and of course, the winter squashes. Winter citrus brings brightness to the season. Blood oranges, kumquats, and grapefruit. This is the time when we are utilizing our pantry, our supply of nuts, jams, preserved fruit, and tomatoes from the fall. This time of year is all about green vegetables. Peas, green garlic, baby leeks, tiny turnips. You can eat them raw because everything is so young and tender. If you cook them, be sure you steam them or saute them very gently so you don't get in the way of their tenderness. At Chez Panisse in the spring, at cooks' meetings, everyone has a basket in front of them and is shucking beans or peas. As the season goes on, they get bigger and more starchy, and we cook them differently. But in the spring, we just blanch them. The softer herbs start to come back: tarragon, chervil, chives. Baby artichokes arrive, and foragers bring in baskets of morel mushrooms. Nettles are a favorite of mine, with their earthy, green, nuttiness, and nutrition. We use them on a delicious pizza. Then we get the first springtime strawberries. They overlap with the end of kumquats briefly for a beautiful moment of tart and sweet. We look forward to the first harvest of the Blenheim apricots, with the flavor so concentrated, it feels almost like you're eating apricot jam. In early summer, the cherry tomatoes arrive. Then we get into heirlooms: purple Cherokee, chocolate stripe, or black Brandywine. They're some of my favorites. In late summer, we get the dry farmed early girls. We intentionally buy as many as possible because they're the very best for preserving. During the season, we get new corn practically every day at the restaurant. Make sure that it has just been picked. If it's been longer than a couple of days, the sugar converts to starch and the sweetness dies. But when it's fresh, you barely need to cook it. Summer is the window for basil and pesto. And the garlic harvest is in July. Stone fruits come with so many different varietals: peaches, plums, nectarines. You can keep ripening them on a sunny counter, but their sugar levels won't increase once they are harvested from the tree. To tell if they are ripe, press around the top near the stem. You're looking for some give, but the best way to tell is to cut into it and taste it. Then we get into the nut harvest: almonds and walnuts, the new crop of olive oil, and wild porcinis. Broccoli and Brussels sprouts come into the market. And I like to thinly slice the Brussels sprouts and saute them quickly with a little bacon and thyme and a squeeze of lemon. After a long summer, I'm happy to see apples and pears and grapes and quince, and especially pomegranates. When the apples come into Chez Panisse, we taste them both raw and cooked, gauge their sugar levels, and decide how we're going to use them. When you're tasting things right in season, it really begins to change how you taste. When you understand, you always will understand. I mean, you can never go back. You can never think about food in the way you may have thought about it in the past. And that's the beautiful thing about this delicious revolution. I call it that because it's not hard to do at all, and it completely changes your life. I've come up with seasonal menus that I put together with a home cook in mind. I want you to see how I think about pairing dishes throughout the meal. Writing a menu is something I both love and labor over. This was a lot of the work I did at Chez Panisse when I was cooking on a regular basis. When I'm combining dishes throughout a meal, I want to think about how each course will lead to the next, as well as things that can be made ahead of time so that you can savor having your friends and family over instead of being burdened by it. I usually think of menus in 3 courses: a salad, a main dish, and a sweet end. I'm also wanting to contrast the textures and the color and the temperature on the plates. Menus like this are perfect for entertainment because so much of the preparation can be done ahead of time. When I'm thinking about a menu and I'm having people over to dinner, it's really important that I'm not doing very much at the last minute. And my plan is to serve them, when they just come, some almonds and some olives. And I'm going to roast the almonds in the oven, and I'm going to saute the olives on the stove with some lemon and oil just to flavor them a little bit. I'm going to grill chicken over the fire and serve it with these potatoes, which I'm going to grill as well. I'm going to parboil them here, and then I'm going to cook them on the grill. This fruit compote that I want to make for you is one that could sit in the refrigerator for an hour or 2. But I don't want to have to worry about last-minute preparation. Just about the one thing that I might really have to concentrate on. I mean, it really works successfully to have only one thing hot that you have to think about. And of course, it's more time to be with your friends. I want to season my chicken because the longer that it has salt, the more flavor it has. And I'm going to season it with some thyme and salt and pepper. I took the chicken breasts off of the chicken. I'm going to make stock with the other part and use the legs to make something with as well. But the breasts are rather large. I think that this will be enough for 4 people. So I'm going to sprinkle it rather liberally with some chopped thyme, and then really liberally with the salt. I put a little olive oil on it too, and I set it aside. If it's not very long before dinner begins, I'll just leave it out at room temperature. Maybe an hour or 2, because it's great to have it at room temperature before you're grilling. But if it's longer than that, I would put it in the refrigerator and take it out an hour or so before you're going to cook it. I'll set it. And I always wash my hands after I've touched the chicken. I'm going to start the potatoes in cold water. They don't break up so easily that way. A little bit more, salt the water, kind of liberally. And while they're cooking, I'm going to teach you about aioli. I'm going to make an aioli, and this is the most basic, delicious sauce of chez Panisse. It's with garlic paste and really good olive oil with salt. And you can put all different kinds of flavorings in. I mean, you could make it a green sauce with garlic. Actually, you could leave the garlic out and just have a really tasty mayonnaise with lemon in it. To make this emulsion, it takes an egg that's at room temperature. It's very critical. Sometimes when I want to make an aioli right at the moment, and I have cold eggs in the refrigerator, I'll pour hot water over the egg and let it sit in a bowl for 20 minutes or so, crack the egg and take the yolk out, and I always put my finger in to see what temperature it is. And if it's still a little cold, I might put that bowl over a bowl of hot water to let it come to body temperature, because it's very difficult for the olive oil to sort of connect with the egg yolk in that way to make the emulsion unless they're both at the same temperature. So that's critical for me. I've already pounded the garlic. I think you know how to pound the garlic now into a paste. And I'm going to add it at the end. But when I started to make aioli, which was way back in the 60s, I did a little newspaper column called Alice's Restaurant. And I'd never made an aioli before, and so I asked a friend of mine, and she said, the best way to do it is cut a potato in half and stick a fork in it and stir the aioli together with a potato on the end of a fork. So I succeeded in doing it, and in the restaurant column I said, in order to make a good aioli, you had to have the potato and the fork. And I've, of course, learned that you don't need that potato and fork. But I think what she was talking about was some moisture, some water coming from the potato, and a kind of flat surface that you were moving around. And that's very important too. So I use a little tiny whisk in a rather deep bowl to make it. And I put the olive oil in a pitcher so that you can pour it very, very slowly. That's important. But the first thing I'm going to do is test the temperature of this egg yolk. It doesn't matter if you left a little in the whites there. And for one egg yolk, it can incorporate as much as 1 cup of olive oil. So that's stirring it around a little bit. And then I want to put a little drop of warm water, just a drop. And now I'm going to do this very, very slowly at the beginning, because once the emulsion comes together, you don't ever have to worry about it again. You can add the oil much more quickly. And I can see right now that it's kind of working. I see it making little waves in the egg yolk. It's not liquid. Still not sure whether it's come together yet. Still adding that oil slowly. And steadily, if you need to stop, you just stop for a moment. And then you just continue if you're worried. Now, if it breaks, you can just start over with another egg yolk and pour that mixture in very, very slowly, like I'm doing with the olive oil. And if it gets a little thick here and hard to serve, you can always add a little water to it. But right now, I'm pretty sure the emulsion is made. Now I'm feeling confident, and I'm adding the oil much more quickly. It's such an amazing sauce, mayonnaise, and how we ever came to be buying mayonnaise, I don't know. And why mayonnaise comes white in a jar at the grocery store is beyond me, because I want yellow mayonnaise that represents the yolk of a healthy chicken. And I think it has, of course, to do with the lack of olive oil that's put into some of those mayonnaises that are sold. But it's so gratifying to make this sauce and have it feel like you've really accomplished something. Sometimes I just chop up lots of parsley and I make a green sauce. You can thin it down by adding water to it so it becomes more liquid. Very often we'll serve a fish soup and we'll make a crouton, very grilled, that goes on, and we'll put the aioli right on the crouton. And you end up eating the crouton before you even get to the soup. Well, I think we've just about come to the end of the olive oil. And I want to whisk it really quickly at the end like that. And for what we're doing, I want it a little thinner than this because we're going to be dipping potatoes or eating a bite of chicken. And it could be just a little thinner, so I'm going to add a little water to that so it becomes a little more soupy. Now, the final part is to put the garlic paste in. And if it's not enough, if you haven't done enough, you can always do more. But the garlic gets stronger as it sits. I mean, the mayonnaise taste gets much stronger as it sits with the garlic. Yes, I need to add salt, and I added a little salt to the garlic, so I know it's got a little in there to begin with. But if I really want a garlic taste, I might pour the whole mayonnaise into the garlic bowl. And if you're serving with fish, I would definitely do a squeeze of lemon in there. I feel like we should all know how to make a basic mayonnaise and flavor it. Here are some of the ways that I do it. Good. I'm going to let it sit for a minute. How are my potatoes? I'm just testing the potatoes around doneness. They're getting close. When the knife goes very easily in, that's pretty much when they're done. When it resists, got a little more time. But if you're unsure about it, just take out a potato and cut it in half. You can put it back in there. So it's always at the beginning, you just want to get them completely cooked. Because the potato, when it goes on the grill, it'll be warmed up. But if you don't cook it completely, it's hard to make that happen on the grill. You're just trying to get some color on the potato when you put it on the grill, but they should be completely cooked. Sometimes I take the little ones out that I know are cooked, and the bigger ones I might leave in there for another moment. I don't expect that all potatoes cook at the same rate. And maybe this little tiny one too. Perfect. I'm going to really toast the almonds with a little olive oil, salt, and some rosemary. I'm kind of just picking off some of the branches of the rosemary, not necessarily the leaves, but they will be frying along with the almonds and cook them very slowly. So at a low temperature, at about 275. And it's a way that we have been serving almonds for a very long time. Our friend Christina gave us this very simple recipe. When you cook them very slowly, they can combine with other kinds of nuts, and they all cook kind of at the same rate. I think this is probably enough rosemary, and we'll just put them over here. And, of course, we need some olive oil. Not too much, just enough to get them all sort of coated. I think I want a little more rosemary in there. And I'm going to put them in the oven. When it's at a low temperature, you have a lot of time. When it's at a high temperature, it gets a little scary. So what I'm going to do is just warm up these olives. I want them to be slightly warm when they're served. And so I can just prepare them in the pan. Sometimes I just put in a couple of bay leaves and lemon rind. Easier this way to peel it towards me because you get a much more beautiful slice. Maybe one more or two. And I have a little fennel seed here. I love fennel. And I'll put that in too. Of course, a little olive oil as well. I'm just going to warm up the olives. They're going to have a little bit of water in there too. You know, the flavors get infused and it kind of softens the olive. And I think I'm just going to leave it here on the simmer for a little bit. Most of the time, olives come in a brine. And what we do is pour off the brine and then dress the olives in this way, sort of. The brine very often is watery and salty, and we just give them kind of a new life. Wake them up, wake them up. I'm going to check on the almonds, see how they are. Ooh. They're so nicely browned. They're just perfect. Take them off the pan. And look at those pieces of fried rosemary in there. Looks just great. I want to get all those little pieces out. Beautiful. This is a very simple dessert I want to show you. And I use whatever fruit is ripe and in season at that moment. Right now, it's a moment for pears. And so I'm choosing the Warren pear that's ripest. And sometimes I use a lot of different kinds of fruit in it, and I cut them up into small little pieces. And when you do that, it makes like a fruit salad in a way. But it's not a salad, it's really a kind of sweet, not too sweet, but a sweet dessert. And I'm going to make a little mixture here with orange juice and with a jelly. And this one is going to be made with a crabapple jelly that was made by Mary Jo, who works in the pastry department at the restaurant, and she picked all the crab apples at the Edible Schoolyard Project. So this particular jam has a lot of meaning to me, and it's not too sweet. I'm always looking for jams that, like marmalade, is never too sweet. And I love apricot jam too. But you could use any jam to sort of sweeten the orange juice that makes a sort of soup, if you will, for the fruit. I'm going to squeeze the juice into the bowl and add enough jam to make it sweet. If I make it a little bit too sweet, then I add a little lemon to it. But I'm trying to gauge the fruit. I'm going to use these beautiful raspberries and some Warren pears. I'm kind of thinking about it while I'm doing it. Now this particular jam is a little bit firm. And so I want to loosen it up. I'm going to warm it a little bit on the stove. Because I can see already that it's not going to dissolve enough in the orange juice. So I'm just going to do this. Put it on the stove. And you don't quite know until you open the jam how firm it's going to be or how loose, how syrupy it's going to be. And so it's kind of important because you're making a marriage between the orange juice and the jam. So while it's warming up, these are lovely, lovely pears, just like I like them. Very silky. And I'm just peeling them in my hand like this. And I'm going to make little slivers. Just perfect ripeness. Jam is almost melted. I used to make for my daughter's lunch. She would have strawberries that I would cut up and just squeeze orange juice on them. No jam, just the orange juice. She loved it. And I'm going to put some raspberries on. And this is now some more. Lovely. Just toss those very gently. that's it. Now I'm preparing for the guests to come. This is the last moment of cooking, which of course you can always do with your family or friends helping. Cooking over a fire is where I feel most at home. I know it can be intimidating, but learning how to build a fire and use it, not just to grill, but to truly cook, is exciting, and it gives food an irresistible taste. After the fire matures, the flames die down, and you're left with hot coals to pull forward and cook over. We're just at that moment before dinner when I'm ready to cook the chicken. The fire is very hot and coals not too hot. I had a friend who gave me a little basket of the most beautiful chanterelles, and I feel like I should cook them on the grill as well. So I have one for testing right on there now. And I'm going to put the chicken breast, skin down, right there on the grill. And I think the way to get the skin really crispy is to keep it most of the time on the skin side, and then to turn it over for the last third of cooking. And one has to be a little patient and not to touch it until it gets a little crispy, but I'm always wanting to see whether it's getting too crispy, whether I need to move the fire around. So I'm just going to take a little peek here. It looks good. As much as I love cooking over the fire, I don't expect everyone to have access to a fire. You can just as easily do this meal on the stove in cast iron pans. I'll tell you how to do that in the workbook. I'm going to put a little olive oil on the potatoes that I parboiled, and a little salt. And I'm going to put them just flat side down on the grill. Just all around. The really hot part of the fire is to the back. If anything needs a little extra color on it, I'll move it up there. I'm always sort of moving things around on the grill. I want it to have a very even color from one side to the other. So I'm just moving it around a little bit. See, already it's getting some color. I can tell the fire is very hot because I'm having a hard time turning my potatoes. But this is the look of the potatoes that I want. And fortunately for this meal, it doesn't really matter whether it's hot, because they're potatoes and aioli and salad. This could actually be room temperature chicken dish, like a picnic. It really could. So I'm not so concerned about the temperature of those potatoes. I just like them to have a sense that they've been on the grill. The taste of that. Maybe I could put some more of these mushrooms. I'm a little bit afraid to do this really big one. Look at it. Amazing. I think I'll save that one. I think I'll just have that in 2 pieces, just like that. I'm going to peek under my chicken again. It's getting very brown. And so it's a good point that when the chicken comes off the grill, it wants to rest for a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes. So you can kind of finish the other cooking, the mushrooms there, while the chicken is resting. I'm moving also the chicken breast around because there's a sort of one end is more narrow and one end is a little thicker at the top. So I'm trying to keep the thick end over the hottest part of the fire. And if I need to move it a little bit, I will do that. And I can always get a few more coals from the back if I need them. And I'm going to take it off and just to make certain. Now I'm just sort of touching the chicken. It feels firm, doesn't feel soft inside. I feel like it's almost done. So I'm going to cut it on this side. Just take a peek, it's perfect. So they're going to sit for a moment. Get the potatoes. Now the potatoes, you know, they get this beautiful color, but they also get a little browned on the top, and then they're very soft down under that. I love that about these potatoes. Let me check on my mushrooms. You can smell the mushrooms cooking. It's very beautiful. Perfect. Now what I do is I just move the grill to the side, and I just bring my fire down. Add another log, and we're all set for dinner. Well, I've had my salad all wrapped up, and now I'm going to unwrap it. And I'm seeing that it's wonderfully dry. So I'm just going to put it in the salad bowl, looking for all of those really beautiful red pieces, because I'm thinking about what the plate looks like. And it's got the grilled chicken that's kind of brown, and it's got the olive oil, the aioli that's kind of yellow, and the potatoes that are a little white. So it needs some color. And so I want to make this primarily a red salad. And these beautiful leaves. Some are a little big, you can tear them up. It's one of my favorite vegetables. And we can use the whole thing, the whole vegetable. This is the bottom part is wonderful cooked, and it's great raw. The stalks we can use, they can be stuffed inside fish to flavor it. We chop up the leaves, and when it begins to flower at the top, it gets yellow flowers. The pollen of it can be used to season meats when it dries out. It's the most amazing. I'm kind of in awe of this particular vegetable. And today I'm going to just shave this young fennel into the salad. And I'm going to use my mandolin to do it because it cuts them so beautifully. I don't even think you need to take the core out of the fennel. I think this seems I think you can catch it very easily, but it makes these beautiful little pieces, and I love them in the salad. And maybe we want a little radish in there too. You have to be very careful with small radishes. These little ones from my garden. I think that's great. It adds a little color, a little texture. And so I'm ready to put on the vinaigrette. Even though I think I probably will use most of it, I just spoon it on a little at a time, and I toss the salad with my hands. I can't do it any other way. Very gently. I want to make sure that these radicchios are well dressed and that the fennel is as well. And I taste it. It's so important to use your hands. You can feel things that you couldn't do if you had a spoon in there, a couple of forks. And you're just trying to bring up the pretty lettuces on the top. This is the very last thing I do. The moment that I take the chicken off the grill and the potatoes, I dress the salad because the chicken needs to sit for a moment. And I don't want to dress the salad too soon. I thought I would show you how I would plate this chicken. I'm thinking that these two big breasts are enough for 4 people. So I'm going to sort of divide them that way. I would love to talk about portion size because we imagine that one whole chicken can go for 4 people. And if you have other things on the plate, if you have 2 vegetables and you have a salad, it's not really so important that you have so much meat. We think that more is better, and that somehow, if we don't get a lot of food, that we aren't getting our money's worth. And so it's just in our consciousness, and we have to sort of break away from that, have a smaller portion, and see whether we're satisfied. People would say at Chez Panisse that we don't give them enough. But I'm always telling people, if you'd like more, you can have more. But I want them to leave the restaurant feeling good, not just sort of staggering out and just wishing that, that they hadn't eaten so much. So it's very important to me, and I think that we all need to learn it as children. I like to cut the meat in the direction that suggests the direction of the whole piece. These 3 pieces there. I think I'll take a couple of these mushrooms because they're kind of irresistible. And some of these potatoes. And then I'm going to put the aioli right there by the potatoes because I know that that's particularly delicious together. And I've dressed the salad, and I think I'll just put that right there. You can always sprinkle it with parsley if you like. I always like to do it. It's such a delicious herb. And I might just take a little bit of that and chop it and put it on the top. When I was in France the first time, I was 19. And I really hadn't eaten before, I mean, in any profound way. And it was an awakening. It was an awakening of my senses. And it happened because it was a slow food country then. I mean, people took their time. They cared about what they ate. And I was fascinated by it. And they could spend hours at the table in the evening talking about politics, talking about just what had happened to them during the day, and enjoying the whole meal, the courses that they got. It was always portioned out in such a beautiful way. And I was brought into that life and was happy to sit in a cafe in the afternoon and watch the world go by. And we're just in such a rush right now that we miss the beauty and we miss the friendship. I just wrote a memoir, and so I've reflected probably the first time in my life on what it was to grow up in New Jersey. And I tried to think about what my childhood was like and how that brought me to this place that I am right now. And my parents had a victory garden. I didn't know that I was being edibly educated in a way by sitting out in that victory garden and eating a warm strawberry in the summer. I had no idea, but I have a strong memory of that. And I played all day long out in nature. We didn't have a television, so we just played outside. But we always had to come to the table at 7 o'clock at night, and we all ate dinner together. And the only unfortunate part was my mother wasn't a very good cook. But she cared about our nutrition. She cared about us. And she just didn't have the information about really what was incredibly healthy. And the culture of fast food was just then feeding her the wrong ideas about frozen TV dinners and all of the rest. I think we really do want to gather. But it's so much easier when the food on the table is homemade and delicious. And when you're cooking, you're hand making the food. And your friends can feel that. They know that you made that ravioli for them, that you did it with your own hands. You made your own bread. You tore the leaves of the salad. It's very different than when you order food in and you don't pay attention to where it came from. And that's what going to the farmer's market does too. You're connecting with a person who actually grew that food or took care of those chickens and brought those beautiful eggs. And it enriches your life. And it is my hope that all of you will understand this, Many of you may already understand it, but I know that if I could just give you that perfect peach, if I could give that to you, you would really understand. When I was growing up, setting the table was my job. It's still one of my favorite things to do. Setting the table with intention, even for everyday meals, communicates so much. I always like to set the table first. In fact, very often I set it in the afternoon of a dinner that's happening in the evening, because it gives me the reassurance that things will look good when the guests arrive. I'm thinking again what kind of day it is, what time of year it is, and I want to choose something to put in the center of the table that is really appropriate, something that gives people a sense of time and place. And so I saw these apples, these different varieties of apples today, and I just thought, those are always lovely on the table. And I'll probably make an applesauce from them tomorrow. But they're just have a nice color. I also, may just be me, but I love napkins that are kind of dark colored because they just don't show handprints and things. And these happen to be tablecloths from Chez Panisse that in one way or another got stained. And so I cut the tablecloths to the size of a napkin. And my dear friend Samantha dyed them indigo. And I really like them on the table as well, especially since I have blue rim plates. Got these in Mexico. I've had them for years and years and years. They're all different. They're all different. And I didn't say, but I really care whether the napkins are cotton or not, all cotton, because I think you probably know that when you're wiping your hands on a napkin that's made out of some other kind of fabric, it almost just slides off. It's just not a soft, comfortable feeling. And so cotton is what it is, cotton tablecloths as well. And I like things that don't completely match. It's really so great because I use different dishes for the different courses that I have. I don't have a whole big matching set. And I was really validated when First Lady Michelle Obama had her first presidential dinner. And she took dishware from all the different settings that they had. And so every course had a different president's dishes. And then I never set too much silverware on the table because I don't want people to feel like it's a fancy meal. And I turn my forks upside down. It's just a little eccentric thing I do. This ritual is really important to me, but you can create your own rituals around the table. Find your own way of doing this. I'm hoping that I'm communicating to everybody who's coming that I really care about them, that I want them to be welcomed in a very considered way to my house, to the table, that I have sort of chosen things specially. I love these glasses that we have etched for all the different birthdays of Chez Panisse. And these are just flea market wine glasses. So if they break, I don't have to worry about it. But I never understand people who don't use the glasses and the dishes and the silverware that they have from their families from way back, because they just keep getting passed on and not used. And it's a huge pleasure to use something. And if it breaks, it breaks. You know, let it go. Candles always. Candles always. I love beeswax candles. I like the smell. It's definitely suggests, you know, that people are coming soon. Always a big pitcher of water on the table. And considering music, that's very important too. At the restaurant, we had very different tastes, and I always got the final say, and if it couldn't be something that was relaxing for people and sort of in the background of conversations, I didn't want it to happen. But over the years, I think we've all come together, and we rather like classical jazz. And it's a favorite of mine, and I just put it in the background. You know, after dinner, when we're clearing the table and washing dishes, then you can put on some rock and roll, or Aretha Franklin, and a little dancing after dinner. I think I'll get a favorite wine of mine for dinner. It goes so well with chicken. It goes with olives and almonds particularly well. Comes from the south of France, from a vineyard called Domaine Tempier. I'm not somebody who would show you the label of this and talk about it so much if it weren't run by my sort of French grandmother, who is turning 100 years old. 100 years old in 2 weeks. So I'm going to visit her in France for the party. Here's to you. And Lulu. Beautiful. I was called by Catherine Sneed, who runs a garden at the San Francisco County Jail. She called me about 20 years ago, a little bit more. She said, will you buy the produce that we grow at the jail for Chez Panisse? And I said, yes, I'll get the produce if you grow it to our specifications. She said, we will, but you have to come to the garden. And I said, I don't want to go to the garden. Please just send it to the restaurant. And she said, you must, because my students want to talk to you. So I went, and she gathered them all around. And she said, tell Alice why you like the garden. And one young guy, probably 20, raised his hand. And he said, I probably shouldn't say anything because it's my first day in the garden. But it's the best day of my life. That's what he said. And I said, oh my goodness, this is transformational. This has changed him. And I just said to myself, if you can do it in a jail, you can do it in a school. And that was the inspiration for the Edible Schoolyard Project. Just that.
So today's recipe is autumn harvest soup. And this is the perfect time of year to make this recipe because these things that we're using today are all in season and they're at their peak of flavor. because we are on the hunt today for flavor. And we are going to be using every single scrap of food that we can to pull the flavor out. Because of the shape of the leaf, it's kind of got that little fold in it.
I started the Edible Schoolyard Project more than 20 years ago because food touches every one of our senses, which are the pathways into our minds. This is a school with 1,000 middle schoolers who speak dozens of different languages and come from every imaginable economic background. So food is our shared language. It's this kind of empowerment that connects you with other people who are doing the same thing. And when we all get together, we are incredibly powerful. We can change the world. And it's like one plate at a time. Coming around the dinner table, having those conversations with your friends, cooking together are the ways that we find the common values. And we can make something that's greater than the sum of the parts. I've distilled almost everything I know about cooking down to a few principles, which you've seen in this class. They don't have to do with techniques or recipes as much as finding the best sustainable ingredients. I believe that if you follow these principles, your cooking, your life, and our well-being on this planet will be transformed. That's my hope. Many years ago, maybe about 15 years ago, my friend, Angelo, who runs the Renaissance Forge in San Francisco, is a wonderful cook, but he made me this beautiful spoon to use in my fireplace. And I, all of a sudden, got a book from a friend about the magic of fire. And I looked in there, and there was a picture of a spoon in a fireplace someplace back in New England, one of those old big fireplaces. And someone was cooking an egg on a long spoon. And I said, oh, I know what I'm going to do with Angelo's spoon. So I experimented. I lost a lot of eggs in the process. And so I thought I would do a little magic in the fire. So you want to arrange it so there's fire on the top and fire on the bottom. And the two side logs don't matter so much, but it's really important that you see fire on the top. It probably takes about 40 minutes for the logs to burn down to the coals that are in there. Now, the most important thing is to have your toast ready. I grilled it and I rubbed it with a little garlic, the olive oil, and a salad on the side, always a salad on the side. And as soon as the egg comes off the fire, you want to put it right on the toast. So the first thing is to crack the egg carefully. And I'm going to add a little of my Mirage pepper and some salt. Next thing is to put some olive oil on the spoon. And you want to really spread it around, all around, so that the egg doesn't stick. Very important. And then carefully put the egg on the spoon. and very carefully lift the spoon to the fire. I'm going to set it right on the coals there. And there's a fire on the top that's coming down and hitting the egg, but it's very, very hot underneath. And it's beginning to puff up. So you see the whites. And there it goes. Begins to get brown on the top. It's ready. And very quickly, I'm going to loosen it on the sides. A little more pepper on the top. My daughter says she always knows what men I like if I make them an egg on a spoon. But she always wants that first thing when she comes home. She wants me to start a fire and cook her an egg on a spoon. But it's, it's kind of a very eccentric little thing to do, but it's part of the magic of cooking over fire. It's that you can sort of play with it.